announcement has been paid for by the Celtic World Order.
Hello there, and welcome back to Celtic World Order. I'm always Steve O'Matt, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you joining me back here on the channel for another wee special video, another wee insight, if you will, into a topic that's quite apt at this moment in time, quite close to our heart as concerned fans, and one of much frustration. Now, I didn't particularly plan or necessarily want to do this video, but as the frustrations grown, as time's rumbled on and inactivity continues, I decided to have a wee look back and basically question if what I was actually thinking in my head was pretty accurate. Now, what was it that I was thinking? Well, it's pretty clear. If you've seen the title, it's smoke and mirrors. What exactly is Celtic's transfer strategy or transfer policy in that case? What is it that we actually do? How do we operate? And we know we've got millions in the bank. We know we've got a fortune there. Do we actually spend it? We throw it out there all the time, say we don't spend money. Then you get fans out there who'll contrary that and point you to various transfer fees, etc. But the reality is, do we actually spend money? And how do we spend it? And when do we spend it? So, as it says there, that's what I want to look at today. There's it is. The deception of Celtic's transfer strategy. That might seem strong language, but I am very much convinced at this stage that what I'm about to talk about is pretty much the case. I'm not sitting here saying that I'm in the know, far from it. I'm merely like yourselves, a passionate, maybe a concerned fan, and I just want to talk about it. So let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on our supposed transfer strategy. Where do you think we're going to go during the period left in this transfer window? Are you confident in the board? Are you confident the manager is going to get that quality that he's been crying out for? So before we crack on, welcome back to the channel. As I say, it is my pleasure to have you here. If you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you like what you're seeing here, give it a wee thumbs up. And if you want to go one extra, you can share it out. It just helps grow our community, which is thriving. Thank you to every single person who has done that. If you want to connect with us elsewhere, we are on X, and that's at CWPod1888. So let's get in about it. So, as I said, it's no mystery. We have got a lot of money in the bank. There is a lot of stuff floating about there. Yet we find ourselves having only made 3 additions to the squad. Brendan Rogers was shouting for 4 to 5 quality players last season. He never really got that. He got a few in January, but the numbers, the squad depth, it was still very lacking. He's still been crying out for that. He has repeated the message time and time again. He's even went one further to say that he sat down with the beaks, if you will, at the club, told them what he needs, and that he expects that by the end of this window that we will come out stronger. Now, we're getting into our second match of the season. We've got a squad who appear to be bought in. We're playing well. However, you can't allow pre-seasons and a good start to the season mask the deficiencies. We need top quality players in, and as we saw for the example of Kyogo at the weekend, taking a wee knock, hearts were in mouths as he went down, because after that there is no backup. Why are we not buying? Well, we keep on saying quality, 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 and I have asked the question, is quality just becoming something of a buzz term? A coverall that can be thrown out so that if it doesn't quite pan out, we don't get in those X amount of signings that are of a certain standard, that we can throw it back and say, it's difficult to get these type of players in. It's a difficult market to get in, because yeah, we could have went out and we could have got 3 or 4 okay to average players, but getting quality players is harder. Personally, I don't buy that, and I'm getting a little bit tired of hearing that. Yes, I want us to be bringing in the best quality players that we can, but it just feels like another term, another deception, another coverall, as I say, is a get out of jail free, if you will, that, oh, we just couldn't get those guys over the line. How many times have you heard that in a transfer window? We just couldn't get the deal done. Are we perhaps looking at the wrong markets? Now, we've got a lot of money, as I says, and we're a big club with a great appeal. We should be appealing to most players out there, and we do have the ability, if we desire, to pay handsomely in the wage department. But, as I says, are we looking in the wrong markets with perhaps far too lofty ambitions? Now, I'm not saying, do not take that as I'm saying scale it back and look for a lesser quality player. All I'm saying here is what exactly is this quality if you can't get it? Because let's look at Adamida, for example, or Bernardo. Would you say they are quality? Yeah, I think you would. But they're not exactly coming from sides, leagues that are unattainable in terms of bringing guys in. Now, if you're trying to sign someone like Erling Haaland, for example, yeah, that's punching, that's quality that you're never going to get in the door at Celtic. But we maybe need to sort of recalibrate and look at what we're doing here and asking the question, well, what exactly is this quality? If Ida and Bernardo fit that bill, that shouldn't be hard to get, should it? So the question is, why have we not spent the money? And the more and more that I've looked at it, the more and more I'm convinced Celtic's transfer strategy, very unfortunately, I do say unfortunately, appears to be hinging on one thing and one thing in particular: the almost imminent sale of a major asset. Now, I know that sounds ridiculous, but let's have a little walk down memory lane. Let's cast our mind back a few years and let's see what history has told us in that. So, most people will use the jump off point as Kieran Tierney. But what I want to do is I want to go one season behind that, and I want to break ourselves between the 18-19 season right up until last season. What exactly have we done with our player trading model, which, let's face it, is actually pretty damn good? And why have I decided to do this video? Well, I want to show you this first and foremost. This is pretty much the reason why I decided to do this, because Celtic released this little statement yesterday and it managed to raise a few eyebrows. Again, I want to let you know what you think, and I'll read it out to you. So it says here, Celtic have enjoyed a strong on-pitch performance in the 23-24 football season, having won the domestic double. In addition, it has enjoyed a successful year generating gains from player trading. As a result of such gains and a strong end to the season from footballing perspective, Celtic now expects earnings for the year ended the 30th of June 2024 will be significantly higher than previous expectations, which were formed before the conclusion of the season and prior to certain player disposals. Player registration valuation and player trading can and often do material influence Celtic's financial performance, in addition to trading revenue. The summer transfer window is underway, and following the closure of the window and finalisation of the year-end balance sheet review, the club will then be in a position to confirm the extent of its earnings by publishing its results for the year ended the 30th of June 2024 in line with its usual timetable. Those results will be mid-September. So that went out the other day there. Basically, down the stock market saying Celtic are doing well. Look at all this money that we've got. Now, I know it's normal timetable that they would release it in September, but it's also very convenient, isn't it, that by the time we've got these figures, but by the time we get it all together, then we can tell you when it's too late, when there's no pressure, when they've done whatever they may or may not have done in the transfer window, and then they drop the big smiley happy paper, the annual report, showing all that profit, when it's too late, when it can't be spent. Oh, no, we'll spend some in January, promise. So what is it that's holding us up? I translate that. We're absolutely minted, but we're not going to tell you just how minted we are at this moment in time, because we are aware that there's fans out there who are wanting players. There's a manager chomping at the bit to get in some top additions to his squad. And if we tell you just how much money we've got, then we're going to come under far heavier scrutiny. So anyway, let's go back to 18 to 19. Now, for the benefit of this video, I've chopped it down into a year period. So 2018 to 19, 19 to 20, so on and so forth. I'm not going into the major nitty-gritty of this player came in the summer, this player left in the summer, and likewise with January. I'm just doing a cover-all of that year period. And you'll see a recurring theme here. So as I say, most people look at KT as being the first major big sale, the record-breaking one. But we've been selling players for healthy profit well beyond the 18 to 19 season. But I just want to use that as the jumping off point because it is important because we've got our manager, who's our current manager, in situ at the time there as well. So let's have a look at what we actually did in terms of major outgoings. Well, it was the good Dembele, the bold Dembele, the man who was lauded by the fans, a fan favourite. Now, if you cast your mind back at this time, we also had Edward, and we thought, we're doing things right here. Imagine those two up front. We got a wee taste of it in the pre-season. We thought, yes, here we go. It was not going to be the case. In terms of outgoings, we managed to shift on key outgoings. We shifted Dembele for 20 million when he left to go to Lyon. And we also let Armstrong go for 8 million. So just on those two players alone, we've got a 28 million pounds income. Now, in that 18 to 19 season, what other significant signings did we do? Well, we made French Eddie a permanent fixture, 9 million pounds fee, massive. That was meant to be our sign of intent. That was us levelling up, but of course it was caveated by someone leaving, was it not? We also brought in Bio. Remember Bio? £2 million. And Marian Shved, if you remember, a guy who in a press conference, the manager essentially says, don't even know who he is. He just trapped up. And I think I've got enough wingers. So there you go. Just in that first initial period, £28 million was generated with £13 million going out. Now, those two things are not the same. Eddie coming in, absolutely. We already had Griffiths in situ. But going from having Griffiths, Dembele and Edward to Bio being your third choice and for £2 million, well, it's hardly an apt replacement, isn't it? Celtic posting a heavy profit there, around about £15 million. Now, I'm also not including all these fly-by-night guys that we got in on loan and nominal to no fees, because we'd be here all day if you look at the amount of players that Celtic have managed to get in. But that, for me, is just epitomising when we've got a manager striving, as he is right now, for real top quality coming in the door, that's what he gets served up. And ultimately, that is what made unrest with Brendan Rogers and helped with his departure, whether you like that or not, whether you are still bitter about Brendan Rogers leaving. When you look at that, what he lost to what he got in, you can understand the frustrations are there. But then the recurring theme continues on as we go to 2019 to 2020. Now, again, this is the KT season. That was really the only major key loss of significance, and it generated £25 million when he went to Arsenal. Now, what did Celtic do with that money? Let's have a little look. Incomings, we had Julian, £7 million. Can't argue with that. Kamala, remember Paddy Kamala? £4 million. Again, another punt, another high tag for nonsense. Volleyball and goalie, £3.3 million. Sorrow, 2.2. El Hamid, pretty decent player if we were honest with ourselves, 1.8. We got Taylor in as well, coming in for Kelly. I believe that was about £2 million. And another interesting one between Luca Connell and Jeremy Frimpong, combined fee of around about 800k. Now, in terms of the fees that you'll hear through this video, they are rough estimates because depending on what you see, what's been printed, they're higher, they're lower, so I'm meeting somewhere in the middle. Again, it's just to give a general flavour, but it stands up when all is said and done. We also brought in some loans there that may have had some loan fee attached. Elianusi, Forster, Baugh, remember Baugh. That is what we managed to bring in there. But KT going out, was about circa £21 million, and all that I've just listed that went out in 2019 to 2020, with £25 million coming in. Celtic are in profit. They've sold an asset and brought in people. Now, if you look at face value, Julien, Elianusi, Forster, yeah, they look on paper as being spending that money well. But I'm not here to talk about whether we have spent it particularly well or badly. It's more about what are we doing with money that's incoming, because I'm only focusing on money that we are generating through selling players. I'm not taking in Europe, domestic success, the generating money that brings, merchandising, sponsorships, everything else on top. We're simply looking at selling players to finance rather than using a combination of both. So fast forwarding on to 2020, the dreaded 2020-21 year, the COVID times. Well, it was actually a surprising standstill, but that should also come as no surprise, because the footballing world was on its knees. There wasn't too much in the way of actual transfer activity, big transfer activity. And again, that's probably why we had guys staying, the likes of Edward, etc. Probably because it was a lot more difficult to move players in that climate. You could have argued that we were doing everything right to try and go and push on for 10 in a row. But as we know, looking back now in the fullness of time, that a lot of these guys had been planning, they'd been earmarked to go and they'd wanted to go. COVID kind of got in the way. They probably should have maybe upped their game a wee bit, showed a wee bit more commitment. That's another story for another day, but it is what it is. We kept some guys about. It didn't quite work out. So we actually seemed to spend money here. Remember, we done the graphic and it was sitting here thinking, what a great transfer window. Well, what did we do? We brought in a Yeti, about 5.5 million. We brought in Barkas at 5, Turnbull at 3. Those were the significant purchases. We also had guys like Duffy and Laxalt, etc., coming in for loans. But a 13.5 million or thereabouts outgoing on spend. In terms of what we also popped out on that year, Frimpong for 11 million. Kamala, we managed to almost scrape our money back. He was about 3.5 to 4 million pounds when he went over to the US. Kouassi, do you remember him? We still managed to scrape around about £1.5 million selling him. And El Hamid, again, pretty much cleaned their noses. He went for about £1 million. So that was a £17 million incoming. So over the piece, even during COVID, we retained a lot of good players, as we say. We still managed to make a tidy little profit, just over £3 million in that season. Interesting. Now, obviously, we all know what happened in that season. Let's not go back and give ourselves that PTSD. It was a grim time. We kick on to the next season when, who's this mystery manager that comes in the door? Ange Postecoglou. Remember? We courted Eddie Howe, Celtic doing Celtic things. We were all bought into that, but we landed on our feet with Ange Postecoglou. We came in, and this is one of the few times that we actually thought there's going to be a change in the guard. Dom Mackay, remember Dom Mackay sat down, and with that transfer window with a lot of incomings in this season, with a couple of outgoings. What did we actually do in 2021 to 2022? Well, the key outgoings, Edward, £16.5 million to Palace. Aya, £15 million to Brentford. Christie, 2.5 down to Bournemouth. Bio, we got Bio off the books as he made his way down elsewhere. £1.5 million. And Jacques Hendry, around about £1 million. Again, I'm not adding in guys, end of loan fees, released, etc. I'm just solely looking at hard cash coming in. There's an argument to be made for all the guys that have managed to get off the books where you're freeing up wages. But again, for the keeping it nice and straightforward, I'm disregarding that. You can also, you'll know yourself who went at this time and fall in that category. High earners getting off the books, etc. You know, your Scott Browns, all that kind of things for seasons past. So you'll be able to roughly work out that we were saving a lot as well on that kind of natural wastage, if you will. Now, this was the super season in terms of incomings. This was one of those ones where probably is the last time that we've had a properly properly quality ingoings versus outgoings. What did we do? Kyogo 5.2 million, Starfelt 5, Abada 4, Juranovic 3, Giacomakis 2.5 million, Matt O'Reilly, a man hot topic that's essentially driven me doing this video, £1.8 million from MK Dons. Joe Hart, nominal fee around about £1 million. Hatate, 1.5 million. Liam Scales, 600k. We also got in loan signings. There'll be a loan attached there, but the loan fees at the front end, not too commonly known. Carter Vickers and Jota. We also had Maeda, if you remember, he joined us on loan and then later became a permanent fixture. So we actually brought in £36.5 million in the 21 to 22 period. £36.5 million. We spent £24.8 million. Now, if you look at those names that I've just rhymed off, I think that's the first time where you can actually say we did well. We've strengthened now, not only strengthened in terms of overall quality, as we look further down the line for what it's worth, many of those guys had sell-on, really good signings, a properly good window. But the key point is we still spent less than we brought in. We posted around about £11 million profit. And if you ever remember and cast yourself back to that season when you had managers saying about how, Ange Postecoglou was lucky that Celtic were buying the league. Well, we bought a lot of players, we bought a lot of quality players. But did we actually really spend any money that we had in the bank? The answer is no. Now, I know I'm sitting here and I'm laughing about that, and you might say, Steve-O, look, that's perfect. That is perfect. Yes, it is. It is. It's a great player trading model. We have been fantastic at doing this. But the frustration comes at that it shouldn't always be a case of we sell and we replace with that money. There's nothing wrong with forward planning. There's nothing wrong with spending some of the vast cash reserves that you have at the front end, bringing in players, supplementing what you've got. And if at some stage guys decide to leave, then that's fine. You cross that bridge when it comes. You don't wait for that to happen before you cross the bridge, if that makes sense. So we're getting closer to home. We're getting closer to modern day. 2022, 2023. There's a recurring theme here. What did we do? Well, outgoings were Juranovic, 8.5 million, Giacomakis, 4, Julien, nominal fee, £1 million. We generated just around about 13 to 14 million pounds from those outgoings. Now, this is the interesting bit. What did we bring in? Well, we secured Jota and CCV as permanent fixtures, roughly about £6 million for each of them. Bernabei, £4.5 million. Money well spent. Alistair Johnson, £3 million. Good signing in the fullness of time. Who we've just managed to make a profit on. We brought him in for £2.8 million. And, of course, Haksabanovic, £2.5 million. Now, on paper, that's a 24 to £25 million spend, which would mean that Celtic actually spent £11 million, if you believe that. Because if you cast your mind back to what I just told you about the year period previously, we actually posted that as a profit. So, reality was, that's how much we spent. We also had Maeda became a permanent fixture there as well. Again, call that shrewd business if you will, but it is, as it says, smoke and mirrors. The deception of what we do is a transfer strategy. You look at that and say, we have strengthened, we have spent money. But the reality was that Carter Vickers and Jota were in the door. We retained them. We had to retain them. We'd agreed those fees. That was positive. That's between the 21 to 22 period and that's probably the last vestiges of actual proper investment in retaining quality. Now, we should have been doing this season with Ida and Bernardo. We've already got Bernardo in. Where is Ida? We're standing still. We talk about falling asleep at the wheel. Are we doing this? Are we going down that route once again? It's worrying times for me as a fan. I'm sure it is for some of yourselves as well. We've got enough in our fan base that will continually say, keep the faith. And yes, sometimes you have got to keep the faith, but you've also got to read the room. You've also got to comment on what is right in front of your eyes. And it's a concerning trend that we're starting to see. So let's take ourselves over and finish up on last season, 2024 to 2023, 2024. Celtics ingoings and outgoings. How do you think this one panned out? There's a recurring theme. So outgoing Jota, 25 million as he goes over to Saudi Arabia for riches. Abada, we take about £10 million on him. Starfelt with cleaner nose, he goes for about 4.5 to £5 million. We get 2.2 million for Turnbull. And between Ayeti, and the long forgotten Ideguchi, we managed to claw back £1.5 million on the two of them. 43 to £44 million incoming on those players alone. Now, what did we do? In typical Celtic fashion, we spent a lot of money. Was some of it wasted? Was some of it quality? Well, you can judge for yourself. Nawrocki, £5 million. Lewis Palmer, 4.5. Nicholas Kuhn, 3.5. Gustav Lagerbielke, similarly, £3.5 million. Thiago Holm, 2.5. Yang, 2.5. Tilio, £1.5 million. And Kwon, £1 million. Now, between those players, roughly about 24 to £25 million outgoing, but we still post a £19.7 million profit. Now, if you look at some of those players, where are they and what have they done? Well, on paper, that's the great thing. On paper, Nawrocki looked to be fitting the bill, didn't he? You could even argue Lagerbielke was fitting the bill. Palmer, possibly. You were getting excited about that as well. Certainly those fees being around that 5 and 4 mark were a lot more of what we were expecting as fans and what you would perceive to be a better quality player. Although, as we've seen, fee doesn't always guarantee quality. If we cast our minds back to your Ayetis, your Barkas, and certainly your Bernabes. But that's down to scouting. That's down to the powers that be. And certainly some of those names were the last hurrah of a very failed Lol Jr. and co-production who have since went out the door. Now, during that period, we've been as fans left completely in the dark as to what is Celtic's transfer strategy. Who are those pulling the strings? Well, it's pretty clear that it's been Nicholson and Rogers sitting down having direct conversation. That's simply not acceptable, is it? We're sitting here looking, we appear to be rudderless when it comes to our transfer policy, our transfer strategy, our scouting system. It's great that the manager wants to have a handle on these things, but as he rightly said, he's done his piece. He can't be splitting himself and spreading himself thin. He needs to focus on getting the team that's here now up to speed to the best quality it can be, to put in the performances that we've seen pre-season in that opening game there at the weekend against Kilmarnock. But he can't do it alone, and he can't do it continually going to the well. We need replacements, and we need them fast. We find ourselves at this period with one recognised striker. Quite frankly, that's unacceptable. We find ourselves having only made one outfield signing by way of Bernardo, which should have been in situ literally a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks after the end of the season. Yet we, in classic Celtic style, managed to drag it out. We also managed to reduce the fee. I'm not going to complain about that. Good business. But business, it seems to be the overarching thing of how we do, how we operate. We treat ourselves first and foremost like a business rather than a football club. I've said it time and time again, the badge says the Celtic Football Club 1888, not Celtic Enterprises 1888. Now, it is important, and as time has shown, that having a good, solid business plan, if you will, generating income from various places, having a sustainable business model has really, really helped us out, particularly if we cast our mind back to COVID, when other teams were near enough folding, when they were taking on loans from the government. We were able to be self-sufficient, not take on anything, and still keep our head above the water and in a slight profit. But since then, we have massively kicked on. We have had trebles, we've had doubles, we now find ourselves for the third year going into Champions League. 3 years on the trot going into Champions League with all the riches that come there. We're now getting a new format, Champions League. 4 games at home, 4 away, 8 games. That's going to generate far much more money. Merchandise, shirts, everything. The club have been releasing, since they've been with Adidas, on average about 3 training wears, 3 leisure wears, special edition trainers, etc., etc. Tops that we never wear. We are hand over fist making in millions and millions and millions. Come back to the Champions League. That package is likely to be about £200 per fan. Before we even kick a ball in the Champions League, Celtic get generated guaranteed income that's going to be in a region of about £80 million between ticket sales, etc., etc. And that's before you even get down to the nitty-gritty potentially taking points there. If you were to win a game, it's roughly around about £2 million it generates, £2.5 million, and roughly about £1 million for a draw. This is the problem here. Look at what I've just went back. Yes, there's been periods where we've spent money and we've brought in players. However, it has all entirely been on selling assets and using some, because it's certainly not all of that money that's generated, on reinvestment. There's always been a wee wedge. There's always been a profit margin made when we've brought in players. We're probably one of the few teams in world football that are able to do it. And I'm not going to sit here and completely board bash. I think we need to be forcing the board into action. We need to be asking questions of the board. But for all the good that they do in terms of how we are run as a business, they really do fall down on the bread and butter, which is investment in the squad, quality investment in the squad, to the level that the manager and us fans are craving, to the level that's going to not only continue the domestic dominance, but give you at least a fighting chance in Europe. Now, what do I mean by a fighting chance? I'm not under any illusions here that Celtic are going to win the Champions League, get to a semi-final or the likes, but give a better account of yourself. I've said time and time again, spending that little bit extra at the front end on quality players. People say, why would you buy quality players for 6 or now 8 games in the Champions League? It doesn't add up. Well, I counter that by saying, if you've got better quality on the pitch, your bread and butter, the domestic stuff should, no guarantees, but it should make that, in theory, that little bit more comfortable, that bit easier to continue with that dominant performances in your domestic game. But when it comes to the crunch, when you go to Europe, you have a higher chance of winning games, drawing games, generating money from that, rather than just saying, thanks for inviting us, we're glad we're here, we've got the money, doesn't matter what the results are. And that's the short-sightedness of the way that we operate. The manager, he's thinking in the same way I'm thinking, the way that many of yourselves out there will be thinking, as I've just said, better quality in the pitch makes that domestic stuff easier, gives us a better chance there. I can't understand why we don't look at it that way from a board perspective. You could go out and spend 20, 25 million pounds, as we've seen with the amount of money that we're generating. It's not even going to touch the sides. It's almost like, dare I say it, free money. Celtic could go and spend £25 million tomorrow on a couple of players and he would still be posting a massive profit without selling any players. I can guarantee you there was a team that were playing last night who didn't look particularly fantastic. They scraped a draw against a very average team. Do I think they will get to the Champions League? If I'm being honest, I do not. However, why am I bringing them up? We'll see for all that they are in terms of people want to laugh, their skin, or this, or that. One thing that they do is they always seem to give their managers the best that they can with what they have. Now, if they were to, by some divine miracle, be able to qualify for the Champions League and we're on to about 50 to 60 million pounds in revenue from that, I can bet your bottom dollar that they'll go out and they would spend a good wedge of that. A good wedge of that. Why? Because they ultimately, they want to catch up with us. Yes, they want to try and wrestle back the title. Good luck with that. But that's what they want to do. They want to improve on the pitch, but they also want to give their fans the best possible product that they can, to give them a fighting chance on whatever front that they go into. Now, we know that they've got a history of bad spending. It is what it is. But you've got to commend that, because at the forefront of the mind, it's always trying to improve on the pitch. We could take a leaf out of their book, and it's the only leaf I would take out of their book. But that should be the priority all the time. Make sure that you're putting the best on the pitch. We could go and spend, as I says, 25 million, even 30 million, whatever, and it still wouldn't touch the sides. When all's said and done, Celtic are going to be dropping that report in September, and by its own admission, it's outstripped all expectations, all predictions that they had, all projections. So if they're saying that, you know it's going to be good. The last time they were posting reports saying we were around about £70 million hard income in the bank. It's only going to grow on top of that, is it not? And as I say, it's going into a third year, and the most financially rich, giving Champions League setup in many years. Why are we not dipping into some of that money that we have right now at the front end to give ourselves a fighting chance? Well, as I say at the top of the show, why? And as I'd like to think I've shown you here, because Celtic don't operate that way. Our player trading model, as we call it, yes, it is very good. Yes, I've just showed you how we can sell for massive profits, regenerate the team to mix results from season to season, but do it just with player trading money. Now, again, you might say, well, Steve, well, that's what you should be doing. That's great. Yep, I'm not going to sit here and criticise, but as I say, it's a deception. The board are selling us something as, look at how much money we are actually spending, when the reality is, when you remove the green tinted spectacles, they're not actually really spending anything. It's free money. It's money that has been brought in by selling players, and more often than not, we don't even spend what we brought in. We don't even break even on that. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, as I say, and sang their praises, all the positive business stuff that we do generating in, we are bringing in millions upon millions upon millions. Celtic could buy players season to season with what's in the bank and still post a profit, because we are ran that well as a business. But Celtic's transfer strategy is wait until that big offer comes in. There's always got to be one. And unfortunately for me, I am almost consigned to the fact that I believe that to be Matt O'Reilly. Dare I say it, and or potentially one other. I'd like to hope it's only going to be one. Take aside the season where it was Eddie and Aya. Generally speaking, it's always been one player. And sometimes we can deal with that. But if we want to act like a big club and say that we're a big club, then it's time to start acting like one, is it not? As I said many times in the show, I think that if we were to retain O'Reilly, retain Hatate, whilst adding in another 3 to 4 quality players, that would be as big a sign of intent as any. I've also said as well that sell them in January. Give yourself the best chance here. Celtic should be looking at the Champions League. You're going to play teams from pot 4, teams from pot 3, 2 and 1. Now you've got a right good fighting chance between the pot 4 and pot 3 teams to get proper points on the board. Not just at home, but away. If you look at the projected pots there, there's no easy games in the Champions League, but there's a lot of games that you would fancy. Now, I've just told you how much you can generate from a win and a draw in the Champions League. Spend that money now with a view of, don't worry, we'll get it back by way of points, by way of additional income from performances in the Champions League. Now, Celtic, with the size of club that we are, we should be pushing on and we should be looking at it. We should be looking at some of the smaller European sides with far less financial income, disposable income, etc., who have managed to punch above their weight time and time again in Europe, yet we seem to fall down. Now's the time to act. Now's the time for us to break the mould, change, dare I say it. Spend money right now, the money that you already have. Don't wait on it coming in from selling someone. With Brighton, Chelsea, Atalanta swirling about, reports have been ramping up. And I hope I am wrong. I hope to God that I'm wrong here, but I do genuinely start to get the feel that O'Reilly will be going sooner rather than later. Now, the one thing that I would say is we're dithering on getting guys in the door. If it is going to be Celtic doing Celtic things and selling that big asset, then I would rather be done it sooner rather than later. Not waiting till the 11th hour of the transfer window and letting them go and then scrambling about and, as I says, spending a very small portion of what you've generated on maybe 1 or 2 permanent signs and a couple of last minute loans. Simply not going to cut the mustard. It's certainly not going to be acceptable. That's what I think Celtic's transfer policy is. Let me know what you think. As I said, I've went through the years there. There's a recurring theme. Sell big, spend little, hope for the best, repeat, rinse, and refresh. Do you actually think that we are going to be making the assertive action that we need anytime soon? Or, as I've said, are you expecting it to be a case of waiting it out and seeing what comes along? Keep your eyes open here. This isn't a video that's been designed to provoke disagreements amongst the fan base. I see a lot of, as I said, keep the faith. I see a lot of, trust the process. You can only trust that so far. I genuinely believe every single word that Brendan Rogers is saying. I genuinely believe that he was brought back to improve us in Europe. And to an extent, I feel he was probably given some level of assurances. However, this Celtic board, they can always surprise you and then never surprise you at the same time. And what do I mean by that? Well, they've been taking people like yourselves and I as fools for year upon year. Taking, and giving very little in return in terms of what we want to see, that investment on the pitch. Who's to say they've not also done that to a manager? Given assurances, but then pulled the rug from under his feet. He's not made any bones about his opinion. He's been pretty direct here, but he can only say it so many times. He needs the support. So, there we go. Interesting. Maybe told you something that you already knew. But as I say, there's a lot of fans out there who are blinded by the deception, the smoke and mirrors that is, oh, but we spent X amount. Yeah, we did. But take a look at how much money we brought in. And ask yourself, usually that spending spree comes immediately after the sale of a big player. The sale of a big player. Somebody getting out the door. We've not done that yet. Is that the reason why the spending hasn't quite happened? Well, anyway, thanks for joining us. Let us know what you think is going to be happening between now and the end of the transfer window. Are you optimistic? Let me know in the comments what you think we need in terms of numbers, positions. I think we all know that we need 2 strikers. We probably need a wee bit of defensive cover, and another midfielder wouldn't go amiss in the Matt O'Reilly mould, should he be the one that's going to be going, because certainly any of the options on the bench and Bernardo, they are not a replacement for Matt O'Reilly. They are 2 different things. Thanks again for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure. Enjoy the day, whatever it is you're doing with it. And myself and Paddy Boy, and in the fullness of time when he gets back from holiday, the bold Josh will be back. And anything that breaks out between now and then if we do happen to get a signing from nowhere, we will be here to cover it. Thanks again for joining us. And as I said before, if you haven't done so, before you leave, make sure that you hit that subscribe. Make sure you give us a wee like if you like what we do here. Till the next time, take care of yourself. And as always, hail, hail.